Hello, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining. My name is Anita Gel, and I'm Quality Operations and Training Manager at Polar Palmer Limited. I have worked in the industry for over 25 years, starting my journey in the production environment and working through various roles to quality assurance and training where I am today. I have experienced the inspection from the operator point of view on the production line, from the quality assurance member in the back room, and also as the person in the front room being interviewed by the inspectors directly. And today I would like to talk about the inspectors and the audit trail. My aim is not just to explain what an audit trail is, but to show why it matters so much when regulators are trying to understand whether a result, a batch decision, a quality conclusion can really be trusted. Audit trails are sometimes treated as a technical features that is hidden inside the system by the companies, but the inspectors see them differently. They see them as a route to the truth behind in the final record. And as we move forward, I would like you to think about a reported result and what's the evidence that sits behind it, and then slightly think about how you can make that evidence inspection ready. If you have any questions or comments during the webinar, please leave them in the comment section and I will respond to them afterwards. Thank you. Let me begin by setting out the route for our discussion today. And first, we will start with the final report and ask, what does it prove? And just as importantly, what it doesn't prove. Then we will think like an inspector and use the four lenses, which is completeness, chronology, attribution, and governance. After that, we will look at how to read an audit trail in a structured way rather than treating it as just a technical log. And then we will connect the audit trail review to inspection readiness, including retrieval, evidence packaging, the review roles, and remote access. And finally, we will look at what happens when concerns are identified and how organizations should contain, investigate, remediate, and verify those concerns. That flow matters because inspection success is not about showing that a system has an audit trail function. It is about proving reconstructibility under pressure. And with that route in mind, let's start with the key distinction between the reported answer and the evidence behind it. A passing result can look clean, simple, and reassuring. So a report may show 99.2%, which is a pass decision, and a reviewer approval. And at the first glance, that can seem complete. But inspectors do not stop there, because the final report only shows the answer. It doesn't automatically show how the answer was created, whether anything was repeated or changed, whether earlier results were omitted, or whether processing was altered in any way, or whether reviewer approval considered the full event history. And the audit trail is valuable because it opens the route back to the source of evidence. It can reveal the creation time, the acquisition time, sample identity changes, any sequence changes that were made, reprocessing or manual integration. It can show us if there was any results that were deleted or any configuration changes, and all the approval events. So in other words, it tells the story behind that number of 99.2% pass. And the practical inspection question is very simple. If a regulator points to a final result, can your team move rapidly from that result to a complete, source-supported record without contradictions? And the question here leads naturally to common beliefs that needs correcting before we go further. So our myths versus reality. A useful way to frame this topic is to separate those two. So we need to separate the myth and the reality. So there is the myth that the inspectors always begin by opening the audit trail first. But of course, the reality is a lot more nuanced than that, because inspectors may begin with a complaint or an OOS result or a deviation, recall badge, stability concerns. It depends what they are looking at and what your site is about. It could even be something they observe during the facility walk. What they then do is they follow the evidence, and very often the route will lead to audit trail, because it is such a powerful way to test whether the record tells the whole story when you look at the audit trail. So the title of this webinar should be understood as a principle, not as a rigid universal sequence. So audit trails are frequently examined early because they are high yield evidence. And that raises for us the next question, which is, why do inspectors find them so valuable so quickly? The reason the audit trails are checked early is that they allow inspectors, as I said, to test several critical questions at once. The first one is completeness, where failures, repeats, invalidated results, aborted runs and deletions retained, or has part of the record disappeared. The second part is chronology. Do the times make sense when compared with the instrument records, logbooks, access records, and the physical reality? And the third point is attribution. Can each action be tied to a unique, authorized person, or could share accounts or weak access design make that impossible? And then the fourth point is governance. Did the quality system recognize and escalate adverse information before a GMP decision was made? Or did the organization approve the result without really fully understanding the warning signs that they were there? In one place, the audit trail lets an inspector test completeness, chronology, attribution, and oversight. And once we understand why it is of high value, the next step is to understand what a useful audit trail actually needs to contain in order to deliver the answers to the inspector's questions. Because not every log is automatically a meaningful audit trail. So for the review to be useful, the reviewer needs certain essentials. So what are these essentials? The record must show who performed the action. That needs to be done using a unique user identity or a validated system identity. Then it must show when the action happened with reliable timestamps and interpretable time zone information. If you are a global company and you have sites and the system is across different sites and different data is collected in a different time zone, or however it's set up, your system needs to be set up to a particular time zone, so then you know that the time you're looking at is the correct time. Because if you have incorrect time zone, then your times will not match, and it has been identified in inspections. Where relevant, it should show the old value if any changes happened and the new value, so the reviewer can see the nature of the change rather than just simply being told that something has changed. And for critical actions, it should also capture why the change was made, so the reason behind it, not just the old and the new information. And one important reminder here is that the reason for the reason field alone does not prove scientific acceptability. Okay, a user can type a reason, but the explanation still needs to be checked against the evidence and the context. And once those essentials are visible, the inspector can begin to follow the data in a disciplined way. And how do they follow the data? So the inspectors usually work backwards from a decision and then sideways across other evidence. They may begin by selecting a batch, a result, a complaint, or a data or information, something other that is quality relevant item. And then they check the approved procedure that is related to that. They obtain the final record and trace that record back to the source data. Once they've done that, they examine the audit trail, they compare the chronology across the systems, and they challenge exceptions and any unusual events that they see. And then they assess the quality review that led to the final decision. If the decision suggests a wider weakness, they will expand the scope and they will start digging deeper. The expansion may reach the other users. It may start to encompass other methods, or it might spill into other systems or even other batches. And this means that the audit trail is not reviewed in isolation. It's part of a broader inspection pathway that will link the procedures to the source data, to the metadata, which is the data behind your result, the who, when, and how, and where, the access records, and the reviewer judgment. And that makes it essential to ask a practical readiness questions before you start doing the review. And that question would be, is the audit trail itself inspection ready? And before a reviewer can draw any conclusions, the underlying trail has to be fit for the purpose. And what do we mean by being fit for the purpose or being inspection ready? So it needs to be enabled before the operational use and not switched on after your concerns have arisen. It needs to be protected so that the routine user cannot alter it. They cannot disable it. They cannot purge it. it needs, it needs reliable time synchronization. So your timestamps are credible and interpretable. It needs to be retained with the associated records so that the review is complete. It, of course, needs to be in a readable format, which means that the reviewer can filter it, they can understand it, and they can use what they see, the data, meaningfully. And of course, it needs to be restorable, which means that you need to have a backup and a recovery process in place so you can recover your information when needed. There's a very practical extension of this is a remote or hybrid inspection readiness. So can the reviewer safely screen share the dynamic record or filter the relevant events, export what is needed, and explain the data without losing the metadata or the context of what we want to explain? And if your answer is no to these questions, then your organization is probably struggling with the review before it even starts. So once the basics of your readiness are clear, the next thing to focus on is your access design, and we can look at the red flags that sit behind that. So some warning signs appear and again in many inspection findings, and shared accounts are a major red flags because they destroy the attribution part. And you wouldn't believe it, but this still happens at sites. People do share the accounts into the systems. If several people can act under one identity, the organization cannot reliably prove who did what. Analyst administrator rights are another serious concern because the same person may be able to generate the data and control the very evidence that is used to verify it. Then we have the deletion permissions that create an obvious risk because unfavorable data may disappear before the review. So you need to make sure that your deletion permissions are set and that nothing can be deleted. Vendor or remote actions also deserve attention because supplier or support activity must be logged, it must be governed, and it must be reviewable. And these are not just technical details because they directly affect the trustworthiness of your GMP record. So a simple question captures this issue really well. And that question is, who can change the record and who reviews those privileged actions? And once those risks are understood, it becomes clear why meaningful audit trail review must be more than just a superficial sign-off exercise, or as we would call it, a tick box exercise, which I have seen happen. When you go and do an audit of a client and you ask about an audit trail, they show you, they do a review, but when you start to ask further questions, you realize they don't understand what they're looking at, why they're looking at it. They're just saying, yes, I've looked at the audit trail review, but I'm not really sure what I was looking at. But I've done it because it's in my form and I need to do a tick box that I've reviewed audit trail. Okay, so audit trail review is not open, scroll and sign, as I said, and it still does happen. I have seen it at sites, so it is a common failure to treat it as just a quick administrative step. Of course, sometimes the issue is that the people have not been shown, they haven't been trained, and they don't understand what is the importance and what is behind it. The real review is risk-based, of course. It's contextual and it must be excuse me, documented. There is a transaction review where the trail is reviewed with the associated GMP record before any critical decisions are made, and that is done where appropriate. There should be a periodic system review, which will look at the access configuration, the privileged events, any trends, and the review effectiveness. So your record review is that effective? Of course, there is a targeted investigative review, which is triggered by deviations and OOS results, complaints, or chronology conflicts. And of course, then there is the independent sampling, where the quality checks whether reviews are actually detecting and escalating the events that matter. And of course, for this to work under inspection conditions, the role discipline is essential. So the right subject matter expert must be involved. The reviewer must have access to the dynamic record, and one person must own the request, and the quality assurance must be there to check completeness before anything is presented. And with that principle in mind, let me turn to a simple workflow that the teams can use in practice. Okay, and this is the 7-stage audit trail review model. This is a practical review model that can be broken down to those stages, where the first stage is the scope, the review by defining the record and the GMP decision involved. The second step is verification, which to verify that the trail is enabled, that it is protected, that it is readable, and that it is available. The third step is reconstruction. So reconstruct the event history by comparing the trail with the source data and the chronology. Fourth step is assess what the events mean and classify any unexplained or critical activity. So do your risk assessment of what you have, what you see. Fifth step, escalate appropriately, and whether that means a deviation or an out of spec result or a security concern or even a broader data integrity investigation. The sixth step is documentation. So you document the review early. You include the scope, the evidence, and the impact, and of course, the conclusion. The seventh step is trending. So trend your findings. So the repeated patterns by user, the systems, or method can be detected. Once events are found, however, the real test becomes how the organization responds to that event. And this is where regulators quickly distinguish the weak reaction from the credible remediation. So, as you know, inspectors are very rarely satisfied with a narrow or just a cosmetic response. And believe me, they can see one when they hear one. A weak response might be to retrain the analyst, to promise that the SOP will be revised later, and review only the single record identified, and then declare no impact, simply because the final result passed. Credible response, on the other hand, looks very different. And it starts by preserving the evidence before changes are made. So it restricts vulnerable privileges immediately if the access weaknesses are part of the problem. It will define the appropriate historical scope rather than looking only at one example. It will assess the product and patient risk, not just documentation gaps. And it verifies effectiveness over time so the organization can show that the fix is really working. It happens so often that the site will have an inspection report, they will provide their responses, and they promise the inspectors the world, and of course then they don't deliver on their promises. It's really important that if you want to demonstrate that you are serious about a credible remediation, that you investigate it properly, you implement a solid CAPA, and then you have the effectiveness check that will demonstrate that your CAPA has been effective. Okay, so where are the audit trail expectations moving today? The audit trail expectations, of course, are evolving because the regulated records are now more distributed, they are more connected, and sometimes supported by advanced digital tools. In a cloud and a vendor-managed environments, organizations need clarity on the data ownership, the provider access, any export rights, incident notification, and even an exit strategy. You might not think about exit strategy when you sign up with a new cloud vendor, but you need to think about your exit strategy. It's too late to think about it when you want to exit the contract. Cybersecurity has also become a data integrity issue because compromised credentials, ransomware, and authorized configuration or clock changes can affect your integrity and availability. Exception analytics can help reviewers by highlighting unusual events, but those reports need validated rules and awareness of false negatives. AI supported decisions are another emerging area where AI materially supports GMP decisions. Organizations should be able to preserve inputs, source evidence, model or service version where available, and then your output. Of course, you have to have human review and then the final rationale. We cannot use AI without the human review being part of it. The key inspection readiness implication here is very practical. Know where the evidence lives, who controls it, and how it will be produced when requested. And that brings me to my closing message and the next step for anyone who wants to build more capability in this area. So thank you very much for joining. The main message I would like to leave with you is that remember, final report shows the answer, but the audit trail will show how the answer was created, if it was changed, reviewed, and approved. And this is why inspectors value audit trails so highly, and why organizations need to be able to retrieve, explain, and defend evidence quickly in inspection. So if this topic is relevant to your team, the Academy of Pharmaceutical Excellence offers further training in data integrity in practice, the frontline, Alcoa Plus behaviors, audit survival skills, and broader audit readiness. Those programs are designed to move beyond the theory and help your teams perform confidently under real inspection pressures. So if you are interested, please contact me or go onto our website, Academy of Pharmaceutical Excellence, to see what courses we have to offer. Thank you again for your time. Please, if you do have comments or questions, put them in the comment section, and feel free to contact me if you would like to continue this conversation or explore any further support. Thank you. Have a lovely rest of the day. Bye bye.